Welcome back, everybody, to another Fit Tips with Autumn. Not sure where Autumn is right now, laying down on the job, but I'm sure she'll come waltzing through here like she normally does. Today we're going to talk about the best way to train to stay pain-free, and that is with movement-based training. Despite what a lot of different fitness categories might tell you, there's no one single exercise that needs to be included in every training plan. Everybody has their own different unique capabilities, restrictions, and those are going to require unique variations of every different exercise for each individual. So with that in mind, how then do we program an exercise routine? And the answer is with a foundation in fundamental movement patterns. Instead of focusing on exercises, we're going to focus on 6 fundamental movement patterns that are going to translate into everyday life movements that you're going to do during normal life. Focusing on these different movement patterns will allow you to choose exercises based on your skill set, your goals, your restrictions, while gaining strength and remaining pain-free. So the 6 fundamental movement patterns are squat, hinge, lunge, push, pull, and carry. 6 movements might seem very basic, but once we perfect these movements, we're able to perform limitless variations that allow us to challenge your strength and stability. So we're going to go through each of these movement patterns, talk about the best way to perform these, and some common mistakes and how to perfect each of these movements. The first is the squat. And if you think about your daily life, how many times you stand up, sit down, you're performing a squat during all of these movements. And so yeah, it's definitely going to be an important movement for us to perfect. So when you're setting up for a squat, we want to keep the feet, knees, and hips in alignment. A lot of times you see people squat with their feet turned way out. And we want to avoid that because the farther out we get with those feet, the less our glutes are able to fire and the less stable our hips are. So feet are going to stay nice and straight during our squat. The second thing is we need to maintain the arch in the foot. So grip the floor with your toes to keep that foot nice and strong and keep that ankle in line with the foot. As you go down into the squat, tuck your hips and brace your abs to keep your back from excessively arching, and pull those shoulders back and keep the lats activated to keep your upper back from rounding. When you go down into the bottom of the squat, your hips and knees should be moving at the same speed and only go down to 90 degrees in the knee, which is going to be slightly above parallel, which again we don't commonly see in squats, but it's optimal joint range and will keep you moving pain-free. Next is the hip hinge, and it's one of the movements that I find people struggle with the most. We're so used to just leaning over and flexing through our spine to pick things up off the floor that we're not used to this hip hinge motion. So a couple things to help you out with this movement. Instead of thinking about bending over and standing up, think about pushing your hips backwards, and then to return back to that starting position, we're squeezing our glutes and driving our hips forward. Again, our feet should be facing forward, keeping those feet, knees, and hips in alignment. And the lats and the core should be tight the whole time to keep a nice neutral spine. If you ever walk around or climb hills or go upstairs, then you're performing a variation of a lunge, and we need to perfect this movement pattern. It's very similar to squat mechanics, except obviously we're performing this unilaterally, so one side at a time. One of the major problems that I see with lunges is that people keep an upright torso, standing too straight. There should be a slight forward lean and your hips should be bent. When you get into that position, you'll feel you're pressing much more through your glutes of that forward leg than that quad. Again, your lats and your core need to be engaged throughout to keep a neutral spine. And we want to make sure that that stance is nearly in alignment. You're not going to have super wide feet. One foot should nearly be behind the other in that lunge. Pushing is probably the most overused exercise in any fitness program. Everybody loves to bench press, and push-ups seem like a great way to improve body weight strength. But a lot of times we're programming pushing way too much into exercise routines, and a lot of times we have terrible mechanics, which causes a lot of shoulder problems. So it's important that we get this movement right to avoid any kind of shoulder issues. Biggest thing to think about while pushing is to keep your lats engaged throughout, and your shoulder blades moving with your shoulder joint. So we don't want just the shoulder joint moving, we want the whole shoulder complex moving. So when you push forward, that shoulder blade should protract, and as you come back down, that shoulder blade should retract. A good way to tell if you're doing this correctly is just noticing where your elbow is and which way your shoulder is pointing. Your shoulder should be pointing vertically the whole time. If at all your elbow gets behind you or your shoulder joint points forward, then we know those lats aren't engaged and we're going to have some shoulder issues. Now pulling is just going to be the opposite movement of the push. And so same thing, we need to make sure that the lats are engaged throughout, that we're moving the shoulder blades and not just the shoulder. So our row shouldn't just be the shoulder joint moving. Again, that shoulder is always pointed up. We're getting the shoulder blades to move and the lat stays nice and tight throughout. Again, if your elbow ends up behind you, you know you're doing this movement incorrectly. And finally, we have the carry, and it's often missed in most exercise routines. But if you are ever carrying groceries or loading stuff into your trunk or just moving, then it's important to be able to control your core during these movements. Moving while under load or carrying weights is one of the best ways to improve core strength and improve your posture and any dysfunctions that you might have. And with the amount of sitting and staring down at our phones and our computers and over our steering wheel, it's more important than ever that we're performing some kind of carry in our routines. So the big thing here is that we're keeping our lats and our shoulder and our bicep and tricep engaged, and we're not just letting the weight hang in our arm. So everything should be pulled back nice and tight, the elbow should be slightly bent, and we're contracting all the way down to that weight. So you can see how these movement patterns translate into movements that you do every day, and you can see the importance of perfecting these movement patterns during your workouts. So when you're creating your next exercise routine, program around movements, not exercises. Thank you guys for watching. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tune in next time for more fit tips with, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button.